From Los Angeles, I'm Eddie Garcia. He's Doug Stolhand. Thanks for joining us for the Puck Podcast. It is Monday, February the 3rd. This is our first period of a three-period podcast. The first period, which some of you are watching on YouTube, recaps the past week in the NHL on and off the ice. In our second period, we have an interview or a special feature. This week, Doug is going to have a chat with Nick Zoureris, the host of Locked On Oilers, to talk about the successful season so far for Edmonton. And in our third period, it's our fan feedback segment where we read listener emails, also have our off-ice report, talk about what's going on in our lives as well. You can find all three periods on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you're seeing, please subscribe. And thank you to everyone who has subscribed so far and is going to subscribe, because we have reached our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Thank you guys very much. Now that you've subscribed, you'll get notified when our latest shows are out, like this one, the Puck Podcast. We also have our Puck Podcast Hockey Minute. Most weekdays, we recap and preview that day in the NHL. We've got Puck Podcast reaction videos to things that go on that are noteworthy in the NHL. And we have our Puck Podcast watch parties. We had another successful one this past Saturday, and we will have another one this coming Saturday as well. Lots of fun.
Yeah, and if you are subscribed, obviously, thank you. If you have not already, if you're listening to this or if you're watching on YouTube and maybe you thought you were subscribed, but you now realize you're not, please hit the subscribe button, and the bell button will give you the notifications whenever a new episode is posted to YouTube or Eddie's Puck Podcast Hockey Minute, Monday through Friday. Some good information every day about the games that were and games that are about to be, and of course, the game of the Puck Podcast watch parties. So thumbs up for liking the videos and subscribing, bells, all that stuff. But Eddie and I, if you're wondering who we are, well, you've made it this far, but we've worked in sports media for a long time, over 30 years combined at Fox Sports TV, Fox Sports Radio, and NFL Network. But our passion is hockey. That's why we're doing this show. And this is our 19th season covering the NHL. We've been putting out the Puck Podcast for every week, I should say, for over 967 weeks since July of 2006. And over the next three periods, we're going to tell you how every NHL team did the past 7 days. We'll recap all the trades, and there were many signings, suspensions, and milestones. And as always, we cover all 32 teams equally as we recap every game from the past week. Some games is just going to be a quick score and a note. Others we will go more in depth on. But we start with the big news from the past week. And for that, I turn it over to my good friend, my co-host, and a man who once, at a concert, stood in line for over 2 hours, ultimately only to buy me a T-shirt. Eddie Garcia.
Which he's wearing right now, if you're watching on YouTube. And I got COVID while I was, I think, in line to get
and then
that
gave
T-shirt.
It to me along with the T-shirt.
Well, it seemed fair.
It's
So we have the trade deadline on March the 7th, but teams obviously are not waiting around for that. And we saw that last week with one of our big stories with the Mikko Rantanen trade. And we had 4 trades this past week. We'll get into all of them, but we'll start with the biggest one that saw the Vancouver Canucks finally trade forward JT Miller to the New York Rangers, along with defenseman Eric Brandstrom and Jackson Dorrington. In exchange, they get the Canucks get forward Philip Hedl, defenseman Victor Mancini, and a 2025 first-round draft pick. The move was finalized after a second attempt for the Canucks to try and trade JT Miller, and also after Canucks president Jim Rutherford confirmed reports that Miller was clashing with fellow star Elias Pettersson, despite both players denying it. Rutherford told the Globe and Mail that the tension between the two of the star players for the Canucks was real, and hinted that changes were imminent. And in fact, that is what happened. The 31-year-old Miller heading back to the Rangers, who drafted him 15th overall in 2011. He played for New York from 2012 to 2018. He was then traded to Tampa Bay. He leaves the Canucks as their second leading scorer this season with 35 points. At the time of the trade, he had played 838 career NHL games with 247 goals and 672 points. Miller waived his no-trade clause to make this deal happen. Vancouver did not retain any of his salary. New York gets the 25-year-old Eric Brandstrom, former first-round pick, 15th overall in 2017. He's played 294 NHL games, mostly for the Senators. This was his first season in Vancouver, where he played 28 games with 8 points. Jack Dorrington is a 20-year-old. He's currently playing at Northeastern University. As for the 25-year-old Philip Hedl, the main piece heading to Vancouver, first-round pick in 2017, played parts of 8 seasons with New York, 75 goals and 164 points. His best season came 2 years ago when he had 22 goals and 45 points in 74 games. This season, 11 goals, 20 points in 41 games. The Canucks also get 22-year-old Victor Mancini, played 15 career games in the NHL, 23 games in the AHL, and that pick, a top 13 protected pick, it becomes unprotected in 2026 should the choice be higher. A lot to chew on, Doug, but obviously it's JT Miller, the main piece, going to New York, Philip Hedl going to Vancouver, other pieces involved. Your takeaway on this big trade from the past week?
Well, Vancouver was in a really bad situation here because they had to trade one of the two players, either JT Miller or Elias Pettersson. And when they decided to trade JT Miller, he's got a no movement clause, which does not allow him to be traded to the best offer they get. It lets him dictate where he wants to go. And he wanted to go to the New York Rangers. So, okay, you call up the New York Rangers and you say, would you like JT Miller? Yes, we would. We'd like to send him to you. What do you have to offer? They're lucky they got what they did, honestly, because the Rangers had, I don't think they had urgency to make this trade. They didn't have to make this trade. This is a nice trade to make for the New York Rangers, but it wasn't a must. And they knew they had the Canucks over a barrel. This was an untenable situation that Rutherford had gone public with at that point, confirming there was a rift between two star players. So something had to give. And getting Philip Hedl, getting Dorrington, who is, like you said, a future prospect and a first round pick is I guess as good as you could have expected, but it's terrible return if you just look at it on paper. If you say we're going to trade a guy that had 100 points last season and is signed through 2030 with cost certainty, well, then what are we doing? Why would we only get a depth forward, a potential depth defenseman in the future, and a first round pick that is going to be at best 14th overall? That's not good return for a 100-point player that's 30 something years old, still in his prime years. So it's not good return when you look at it from a distance, but when you know the circumstances that they really only had one team to negotiate with, and they had to do something to salvage their own season and salvage the morale in their locker room, it's not terrible return. And it was part of two trades that they made very quickly within minutes, hours of each other, I should say, to basically become one big trade. So it was essentially an unofficial three-way deal involving the Penguins as well to make up for some of the lost production. But it's a bad situation for Vancouver. A great trade for New York. They really don't lose anything off their current roster that they will miss. And they add JT Miller, who is now motivated to go and play, doesn't have somebody he hates across the locker room from him, doesn't have that tension in practice, in the locker rooms, on road trips, in the media, etc. Gets to go in there and join a very talented roster. He was immediately put into the lineup, as we saw yesterday in our watch party, with Mika Zibanejad and Artemi Panarin, and immediately scored 2 goals. So this is a guy that is already comfortable with his new team, already playing with star players, and New York gets a huge upgrade for very little cost. I mean, a first-round pick is not nothing, but for a team that's in a win-now mode like the New York Rangers are, it's very expendable, and it's an easy price to pay to get a player of JT Miller's caliber.
Well, that was not the only trade of the week. We will get to that other one you mentioned that involved the Canucks and the Penguins. But how about the Calgary Flames making a deal to acquire Morgan Frost and Joel Farabee from the Philadelphia Flyers in exchange for forward Andrei Kuzmenko, Jacob Peltier, and a second-round pick in 2025 and a seventh-round pick in 2028. For Morgan Frost, he's 25. He had 25 points this year, 11 goals, 14 assists in 49 games. He was drafted 27th overall in 2017 by Philadelphia, 297 career games. He's got 50 goals and 135 points. Farabee's 24. He had 19 points, 8 goals, 11 assists in 50 games this season. He was drafted 14th overall by the Flyers in 2018. He's appeared in 385 career NHL games. He has 90 goals and 201 points. Kuzmenko's 28, 15 points, 4 goals, 11 assists in 37 games this season. He's never been able to match his dynamic rookie season, 39 goals, 74 points for Vancouver in 2022-23. 190 career NHL games, 65 goals, 135 points for Kuzmenko. Peltier is 23, drafted 26th overall in 2019 by the Flames, 11 points, 4 goals, 7 assists in 23 games this year in Calgary. In his career, 60 NHL games with 21 points. No salary was retained in this deal. Thoughts on this deal between Philadelphia and Calgary?
Well, this is one that I think in a year or two, maybe longer, we'll look back on and maybe wonder, how did that player get to that team so cheaply? Because these are all players that had potential at one point and were considered prime prospects for their franchises. Farabee, Frost, they were considered to be part of the future for Philadelphia. It never came to pass. Peltier, certainly considered part of the future for Calgary. That never came to pass. And he had his most famous part with the Calgary Flames was the Daryl Sutter comment of who's Jacob Peltier, and trying to find him on the score sheet to be funny after a reporter asked him about the minutes he was playing. So the change of scenery for all three of those young players, it gives them a fresh start, and a fresh start with an organization that did not draft them to be part of the future, but they still have potential high-end skill. And we'll see if they can discover that. And you find some gold in other people's trash bins. And they were all expendable from their teams. So nobody's going to be too sad to see them go. But again, if Peltier takes off with Philadelphia, if Farabee or Frost catch fire with Calgary, pardon the pun, then you could see people looking back and saying, how did we give up on that guy? Well, you got to remember, at the time, as we record this on February 2nd, it wasn't working for any of those players with their previous teams. And Andrei Kuzmenko, as you mentioned, was lightning in a bottle with the Canucks and has never found that again. And now he gets a fresh start again. We'll see how he enjoys playing for John Tortorella, who is never, an easy.
Everybody loves that. Yeah.
Everybody loves playing for that guy. Yeah. And so we'll see. But I think it's good for all players involved to get a fresh start. I don't think it's going to be world changing for any one of them, unless one of those players realizes their potential and becomes an impact player, which they all have the potential to do, but it was not working where they were.
You mentioned the other trade involving the Canucks. They were able to acquire defenseman Marcus Pettersson from the Pittsburgh Penguins, along with forward Drew O'Connor, in exchange for a first-round pick that the Canucks got from the JT Miller trade, that protected pick in 2025. In return, the Penguins received forward Danton Heinen, defenseman Vinny Desharnais, and the rights to forward Melvin Friendstrom. Peterson's 28, 18 points, 47 games this season, 491 career NHL games. He's got 17 goals and 151 points. O'Connor's 26, 6 goals, 10 assists, 53 games this season, 210 career NHL games. He's got 30 goals and 66 points. Heinen's 29. He played for the Penguins from 2021 to 2023, 6 goals, 18 points in 51 games this season, 539 career NHL games. He's got 93 goals and 230 points. And Desharnais 28, 6'7" defenseman, no goals, 3 points, 35 games this season, 149 career NHL games, 1 goal and 19 points. Thoughts on this?
Leave that up if you can, real quick, Eddie, here on YouTube, because I want to just emphasize the point that ultimately, when you look at what Pittsburgh received, it looks very similar to what Vancouver received for JT Miller. Except when you go over to what Vancouver received, they didn't get a player of JT Miller's ilk. They got a first-round pick, they got a depth forward, they got a depth defenseman, and they got a prospect that may or may not turn into something. Except to give all that up, they only got back Marcus Pettersson and Drew O'Connor in return. Neither of them are impact players. JT Miller could be a huge impact player for the Rangers this year and for many years to come. So you look at the price, the Penguins did a great job of getting value out of those two assets, because if you had told me we're going to look to trade Marcus Pettersson and O'Connor, I would have said, well, and we think we can get a first-round pick. I don't think so, and they did. So well done by the Pittsburgh Penguins on that one. Vancouver collectively got a lot worse, just on paper. You give up JT Miller, you give up Danton Heinen, you give up Vinny Desharnais, and you add in Philip Hedl, Marcus Peterson, O'Connor. It's just not a lot. It's collectively your worst. But what the Canucks have to hope is that the vibes in the locker room, the chemistry on the team, in the locker room and on the bench and on the ice are better now with JT Miller, the distraction gone. And if that's the case, then they can turn themselves into something here in the second half of the season, make a playoff run, and then it's a fresh start. But on paper, they got a lot worse, Vancouver, over the last 4 or 5 days. And it's unfortunate that a personal rift is the reason that they had to make these moves.
And our final trade of the week, the Dallas Stars acquire forward Mikael Granlund and defenseman Cody Ceci from the San Jose Sharks in exchange for a first-round pick in 2025 and a fourth-round pick in 2025. 32-year-old Granlund had 15 goals and 45 points in 52 games this season, 871 career NHL games, got 172 goals and 589 points. 31-year-old Ceci had 4 goals and 15 points in 54 games this season, 840 career NHL games. He has 52 goals and 226 points.
Excellent return. Excellent job by Mike Greer, the GM of the Sharks. Again, if you tell me we're going to package Cody Ceci and Mikael Granlund, and we think we can get a first-round pick and a third-round pick for him, I would have said good luck. But Dallas's hand was forced due to the injury to Miro Heiskanen, which we will talk about in a minute as we recap the games. And they needed to go out and get a defenseman to help them in the second half of the season here, finish strong, get as good a playoff position as possible, potentially win the Central Division if they get hot. But it was a great job of, I think, price gouging for the San Jose Sharks, which you and I have been hearing a lot about in the news here in LA after the wildfires, and people talking about price gouging for rentals and housing options. The San Jose Sharks took advantage of a team that was desperate and made them pay. And I think that was a great job by them. Cody Ceci and Granlund were not part of their long-term plan, but getting an additional first-round pick helps their rebuild, gives them more assets to make moves with in the future. Loved that trade for San Jose. And for Dallas, it fits the need they have right now. Cody Ceci played significant minutes for the Edmonton Oilers in their cup run last year. He's not a stranger to the playoffs and the postseason, but it's not a long-term fix. It's a Band-Aid for now, and hopefully Heiskanen is back for the postseason.
All right. So again, 4 trades this past week. We'll see if we have any more coming up this week, but it certainly has been a interesting pre-NHL trade deadline time for many teams across the NHL.
There's almost a false deadline, right, with this 4 nations.
Yep.
Because obviously there's going to be a roster freeze after a week from today, week from Sunday, February 9th, when they break to go to the 4 nations, and you can't be making trades or putting players on waivers in that situation. So it's kind of accelerated that, because when they get done with 4 nations, and I think a lot of GMs will talk during that break, setting the table for moves to be made as soon as the roster freeze is over. So I think we'll either see a flurry of moves made before the 4 nations, but I suspect more likely we're going to see a lot of moves coming out of the 4 nations tournament at the end of February, because teams have had 2 weeks to sit and talk to each other about what they need, talk internally about what they have, be honest with themselves about where they are and what the rest of the season looks like for them. And if we can sign this player, great. If not, we need to trade him so that we get some assets in return and don't see him walk out the door.
All right. So that was some of the big news from the week. We'll also have some other news sprinkled in, including injury news and possible suspensions, that kind of thing. But let's get into the week that was in the NHL. We go all the way back to last Monday, where we had 5 games on the schedule. And we'll lead it off with the Oilers downing the Kraken 4-2. Not exactly a marquee matchup per se, but Connor McDavid was back on the ice for the Edmonton Oilers after his 3-game suspension, scored a goal, his 21st of the year. Corey Perry gets the game winner as the Oilers, with that win, moved back into first place in the Pacific Division, 1 point up on Idle Vegas. Edmonton had won 8 straight against Seattle. Red Wings rally to beat the Kings 5-2. Detroit was down 2-0 before scoring 5 unanswered goals. Marco Kasper gets 2, 8 and 9 for him. Alex DeBrincat gets his 21st, and Lucas Raymond his 20th. Former Kings head coach Todd McClellan wins his first game against his old team after being fired by LA last year. And last year's goalie for the Kings, Cam Talbot, gets the win in net as well. Detroit now 11-4-1 under Todd McClellan.
Was that game in Los Angeles?
It was not. It was in Detroit.
I was going to wonder if the Kings gave him a tribute. Very cool to see Dominic Shine make his NHL debut at the age of 31. Give that guy the Masterton Trophy, by the way, for dedication to the sport of hockey. Shine is 31 years, 284 days old, and he became the oldest Red Wings skater to make his NHL debut since Vaclav Nedomansky, who was 33 and 249 days back in 1977. He's the oldest rookie to make his debut across the league since Yevgeny Medvedev, who with Philadelphia back in 2015, 33 years old and 42 days. Shine is a native of Pinckney, Michigan, played minor hockey with the Little Caesars amateur hockey program while growing up in Metro Detroit, skated 4 seasons at Northern Michigan University, as well as parts of 9 seasons with the Grand Rapids Griffins. This guy is Michigan, born, bred, and raised, and has loved hockey his entire life. And for him to make his debut on home ice, now to remind me of that great moment for him and his family, and loved seeing it, a dream come true for him and a moment he'll never forget. In that game, by the way, Lucas Raymond scored his 20th goal of the season, became the 3rd Red Wings player to reach the 20-goal mark this season. Also, Dylan Larkin and Alex DeBrincat, who both had 21 at that point. This marks the first time Detroit has had 3 players reach 20 goals through 50 games in a campaign since 1995-96, when Vyacheslav Kozlov, Steve Yzerman, and Sergei Fedorov all did the trick. Raymond also recorded his 3rd career 4-point game and became the 6th Red Wings player with as many at 22 or younger, joining Steve Yzerman, Marcel Dion, Sergei Fedorov, Gordie Howe, and Dale McCourt, some elite company there. And finally, he joined an elite group of Swedish hockey players as the only ones with 3 or more 20-plus goal seasons before they turned 23. The others, Matt Sundin, Philip Forsberg, and Gabe Landeskog, all elite players. It's a great sign of what Lucas Raymond is already and what his potential is for the rest of his career, that he already has 3 20-goal seasons before the age of 23 and seems like he's just getting started.
And I'll show my ignorance. I didn't even know he was Swedish. So,
I mean, it's one of those Doug Murray names.
Yeah.
Lucas Raymond is not a Swedish name. So,
not really. No. So,
I Mason McTavish is Swiss. I mean,
right.
It's where your parents were when you got born.
The Devils lose to the Flyers 4-2. Garnett Hathaway scored the game winner for Philadelphia. The loss for New Jersey. Timo Meier gets his 15th of the season. Flyers 2-0 against the Devils this season, and they've won 4 in a row overall on home ice at that point.
Good news for the Devils. The Flyers will not make the playoffs, so you won't have to see them in there.
Canucks knock off the Blues in St. Louis 5-2 to win consecutive games for the first time since December the 1st. Connor Garland gets a pair of goals, numbers 12 and 13. JT Miller, his 9th, the game winner, obviously still with Vancouver at the time. Blues goalie Jordan Bennington allowed 3 goals on 18 shots before getting pulled.
And in that game, Quinn Hughes recorded his 100th career multi-point game, becoming the 7th fastest defenseman in NHL history to reach that milestone, having done it in just 410 games. The fastest ever was Bobby Orr in 307 games, the fastest active player to have done it, Cale Makar, in 336 games. This is also Hughes' 77th career multi-assist game, which ties him with Thomas Gradin for the 4th most in franchise history. The record is Henrik Sedin with 181, then Daniel Sedin with 107, and then Stan Smeel with 79. So some elite company when you look at that list that we have here on YouTube of the fastest to 100 career multi-point games. Those are all legends ahead of him. And he is in elite company. And we know that he's on a pace to be an all-time great defenseman for the Vancouver Canucks. And another accomplishment on his resume as he goes forward.
And finally, on Monday, the Sharks beat the Penguins 2-1. Macklin Celebrini gets the game winner, his 16th of the season, the number 1 overall pick in this year's draft. Yaroslav Askarov had 29 saves in the win, including stopping a penalty shot. Sidney Crosby did score his 15th of the season in the loss. Pittsburgh had dropped 7 of 9 at that point.
Not a good run and not a good loss if you're the Penguins trying to catch up playoff. I mean, look, Sharks are still a good team. They've got, well, not a good team, but they're still a capable team of winning games. It's not an easy points, but those are the two you got to get if you're trying to make up ground in a playoff race.
On to Tuesday, where we had 8 games, including the Stars getting by the Golden Knights in overtime in Las Vegas 4-3. Wyatt Johnston scored the OT game winner to complete the natural hat trick. Goals 12, 13, and 14 for him. In the loss, Pavel Dorofeyev scored his 22nd of the season. Tomas Hertl his 19th. Dallas did suffer a loss in the win. Doug alluded to it earlier. Defenseman Miro Heiskanen had to be helped off the ice with a serious knee injury when Mark Stone went awkwardly into his legs. Heiskanen will be out multiple weeks.
And this was my grandma fiddler game of the week, as it had a playoff caliber feel to it and some intensity thanks to that Stone hit on Miro Heiskanen, which injured him, unfortunately. And Wyatt Johnston, who, as you bring up the full screen for us, Eddie, here on YouTube, his name was spelled wrong by the NHL research staff that built the graphic you're now seeing. It's Johnston, not Johnson. But he became just the 8th player in NHL history to cap off a natural hat trick with an overtime goal. Oddly enough, the 2nd in franchise history, as Neil Broughton did it back in November of '83 when the team was known as the Minnesota North Stars. And at just 21 years, 259 days, Johnston became the youngest player in franchise history to record a hat trick. The previous record holder was Tyler Seguin at 21 years, 310 days. So amazing game right there. And what a finish for the Stars, who had to feel good coming back after I think what they took umbrage with the way Mark Stone went into Miro Heiskanen, and certainly you're going to when a player gets hurt like that, and a star player like that, no less, no pun intended. But Wyatt Johnston is such a young talent, and them coming back to win that game, man, you could feel the energy in the arena and on the bench. That one meant a lot to the Stars, even though it was just one of 82 regular season games.
Yeah, the Mark Stone play was certainly unusual. First glance, I didn't see that he actually got tripped on the play, but he had told Jamie Benn on the ice, that he had gotten tripped. And then when you go back and see the various replays, there was, I don't know if it was Ben or not, but one of the Dallas players did get his stick into his skates, and it caused his left skate to kind of go awkwardly, and he lost kind of control and unfortunately fell into the legs of Miro Heiskanen. So at first you're like, what the hell is he doing? But on further review, I thought there was actually just a kind of a poor accident, basically, is what I saw.
Well, I think it was a poor decision. Mark Stone's not a dirty player, and he did not go into this thinking I'm going to hurt Miro Heiskanen. But yes, there was a stick at his feet that I have no doubt caused him to lose his balance. But he lunged across after that. He made the decision to lunge across Heiskanen's body rather than use his momentum, which was taking him past Heiskanen towards the boards. So that was the decision that I thought was dangerous, knowing you're falling to dive across a player's body to poke check something, to try and steal the puck. I get it. You're on the forecheck. He's an aggressive player, but you're not in the defensive zone. You're not saving a goal here. And it was a dangerous play. Wasn't malicious, wasn't mean-spirited, but it was a dangerous play that led to a potentially catastrophic knee injury for a star player. And it was unnecessary. I thought if he had just taken his momentum the way it was going, he would have gone right past Heiskanen, maybe even gotten a tripping penalty out of it. But instead, he's injured one of the Stars' best defensemen.
Hurricanes shut out the Rangers 4-0. Frederick Anderson, 22 saves in net for Carolina. Andrei Svechnikov, a pair of goals in the win. Numbers 16 and 17. Carolina had won 5 of 6 at that point.
And we talked with Zach Martin of Locked On Hurricanes last week about the goaltending situation in Carolina. And here we see history made, as Frederick Anderson's shutout was the 4th shutout of the season for Carolina, and all 4 have been by different goalies. They are the 4th team in NHL history to have 4 goalies record a shutout in a single season, the first since the 2002-2003 Blues. The goalies that have shutouts for the Hurricanes this season, how many of them can you name, Eddie?
Well, at least 3. Anderson, Tokarski, and Kochetkov.
Add in Spencer Martin to that list, and you've got all 4 goalies that have recorded a shutout this season for the Carolina Hurricanes. Let's see if we can make it 5. Bring up a 5th goalie. Get him in the net there, especially if you're playing the Ducks. But that's quite the feat and quite the goalie depth that Carolina is enjoying right now.
Moving on, the Capitals down the Flames in Calgary 3-1. Alexei Protas gets his 21st goal of the year. Dylan Strome, his 13th, was the game winner. Washington announced, by the way, that they had signed goalie Logan Thompson to a 6-year extension worth $5.85 million per year. He's been fantastic for them. So they're going all in. They believe what they've seen so far this year from Logan Thompson is what he's going to give him going forward, or at least something close to it. And so he cashes in our nation's capital.
Well, that's not such a humongous deal that it prohibits them from having cap flexibility. And we're going to talk about the salary cap going up here in a little bit. So I think with that knowledge that the salary cap is going to be going up pretty substantially in the years to come, I think that's a bargain price. Getting somebody that you believe is an elite goalie and has been for your team this season for less than $6 million a year, it gives him the certainty he's never had as a high paid number one goalie, but it also allows you the flexibility that if he declines, you're not spending so much on their number one goalie that you can't go out and get a second goalie to be a tandem. Igor Shesterkin is limiting the New York Rangers when he's making $11 million a year. That is not going to be the case here. This guy's making less than half that. And I think it's a good price for the Capitals and a great deal for Logan Thompson, who, as I said, gets the contract and the money that he's no doubt been looking for his entire career.
Jets down the Canadians in Montreal 4-1. Kyle Connor scored 2 goals, numbers 28 and 29. Mark Scheifele gets his 29th as well, and Connor Hellebuck made 24 saves for his NHL leading 31st win of the season. Winnipeg and Washington remained tied at that point for the most points in the NHL, each with 73. Also in the game for the Canadians, Caden Gooley suffered a lacerated quadriceps muscle that he needed to go to the hospital for. Surgery was required. He is out indefinitely. Islanders stay hot with a 5-2 win over the Avalanche. Simon Holmstrom scored 2 goals, numbers 11 to 12. Bo Horvat added his 18th as the Islanders had won 5 straight at that point. In the loss, Arturi Lehkonen gets his 21st of the season for Colorado.
I'm impressed with the Islanders. I'd given them up for dead, and they are playing some very good hockey. Unfortunately, they were so buried. They're not gaining a lot of ground or passing a lot of teams, but they are at least proving that they have it within themselves to make a run, and we'll see if they can keep this going into the Four Nations and then pick it up where they left off when they come out of the break.
Sabres crushed the Bruins 7-2. Tage Thompson and J.J. Peterka each have hat tricks in the same game. For Thompson, goals 23, 24, and 25, and for Peterka, goals 12, 13, and 14. First time a pair of Sabres have had a hat trick in the same game since 2008 when Derek Roy and Drew Stafford did it. Boston goalie Jeremy Swayman allowed 6 goals on 32 shots.
And you mentioned the pair of hat tricks. They're the first pair of teammates to have a hat trick in the same game this season in the entire NHL. And you wonder how many hats were left for the Peterka hat trick after the people presumably threw their hats on the ice for the Thompson one. You're not going to go buy a hat right then and then throw it again. So that was Thompson's 7th career hat trick, Peterka's first. So if any hats were still on the head of a Sabres fan after the Thompson one, you got to think they thought, well, 2 in one night for this team that we've, been praying would have some reason to give us a reason to cheer. It's time to throw that hat. So well done by the Sabres in a embarrassing loss for the Bruins. My goodness.
Blackhawks surprised the Lightning in Tampa 4-1. Ryan Donato gets his 15th of the season. Connor Bedard his 14th, and goalie Arvid Soderblom made 34 saves in net. In the loss, Braden Point scored his 28th goal of the season. Andrei Vasilevsky was not in net in this one for Tampa Bay due to an illness. Chicago snapped a 7-game road losing streak. Also for Tampa Bay, defenseman Emil Lilleberg was hit with a 2-game suspension for his hit on Detroit's JT Compher last week, so he served the first game of his suspension in this game.
You really think it was an illness? I mean, wouldn't it just be the Blackhawks? I wouldn't have had Vasilevsky in net either.
And the Ducks outscored the Kraken in Seattle 6-4. Anaheim scored 3 goals in the second period to break it open. Troy Terry is 16th. Mason McTavish is 12th. In the loss for the Kraken, Jaden Swartz had his 17th and Ellie Tolvanen his 14th, while goalie Philip Grubauer allowed 5 goals on 22 shots, and he would later in the week be placed on waivers.
Yeah, when you get blown out, he's had a terrible season, and he's now down here in Southern California with us playing in the AHL.
On to Wednesday, 5 games, including the Wild, knocking off the Atlantic Division leading Maple Leafs in Toronto 3-2. Minnesota captain and defenseman Jared Spurgeon gets the game winner on the power play, while goalie Philip Gustafsson made 32 saves in net. For Toronto, William Nylander had the lone goal, his 29th of the season. Minnesota was playing once again without star Kirill Kaprizov, who is going to undergo surgery and will now miss 4 weeks.
I mean, again, this is the time to do it. The minimal games missed because of the Four Nations tournament, but you hate to see it, and you hope he comes back 100%. Impressive that they were able to win that game and have stayed in playoff position without him for so long.
Panthers shut out the Kings 3-0. Florida goalie Sergei Bobrovsky, 30 saves in net. Matthew Tkachuk and Sam Bennett each get their 16th goals of the season. The Kings are in a scoring slump, 2 or fewer goals in 9 of their last 10 games, including 6 in a row. Drew Doughty, the star defenseman for the Kings, did make his season debut after suffering a broken ankle in the preseason. Played 23 minutes and 51 seconds in his first game of the season.
I mean, they've been ramping him back up. I've seen the articles in recent weeks. So I thought they might hold him out until after the Four Nations just to give him the full recovery time. But he's ready to go, and obviously was ready to go when you're playing 23 minutes. Didn't seem to be any limitations to his game whatsoever.
Devils shut out the Flyers 5-0. New Jersey goalie Jake Allen, 24 saves in net. Jack Hughes gets his 20th goal of the season. Philadelphia goalie Samuel Ersson allowed 4 goals on 16 shots before getting pulled.
And you mentioned Jack Hughes scoring in the Devils' boat race win over the Flyers. That gives him 134 goals at that point, the 11th most by an American-born player before turning 24 in NHL history. The most was Jimmy Carson with 217, but there are 3 other active players for him to chase on that list before he turns 24 on May 14th. Alex DeBrincat, who he will tie with his next goal, Jack Eichel, who he is just 3 behind as of that game, and Austin Matthews, who he will not catch, as Matthews is 65 goals ahead of him. And again, Jack Hughes only has the rest of this season to try and catch him, and he will not. But it's still an impressive list of American-born scorers, and Jack Hughes, a guy that kind of got off to a slow start to his career, certainly has caught fire in recent years and proved why he was the first overall pick.
Canucks beat the Predators in Nashville 3-1. Linus Karlsson scored his first NHL goal in the win for Vancouver, and goalie Thatcher Demko, 31 saves in net. And the Penguins beat the Utah Hockey Club on the road 3-2 in overtime. Sidney Crosby scores the overtime game winner, his 16th of the season for Sid the adult, 23rd career overtime game-winning goal, second all-time only to Alexander Ovechkin. Speaking of Ovechkin, we move on to Thursday, where we had 10 games, and the Senators edged the Capitals 5-4 in overtime. Thomas Chabot gets the overtime game winner for Ottawa. Josh Norris added his 18th. For Washington, Dylan Strome scored 2 goals, numbers 14 and 15, but Alexander Ovechkin did score a goal in this one, 23 on the season, 876th of his career. At that time, 19 away from breaking Wayne Gretzky's career goal-scoring record, and he's still projected to break the record on April the 13th. That would be game 79 of the 82-game regular season. We'll see. One other note for the Senators, forward Nick Cousins was injured in this game, and he will miss 6 to 8 weeks following knee surgery.
I mean, that's, again, an impressive run from the Ottawa Senators, who have finally seemed to have turned the page and become a competitive team, and they're doing it without Linus Ullmark in net. So I've been impressed with Minnesota maintaining their playoff position without Kirill Kaprizov, who you would think without him they could not be in a playoff spot. They have proven me wrong. And if the Senators were going to be in the playoffs, I would have thought Linus Ullmark would be a big reason for it. He's been out. They've been playing great. I've been very impressed.
Jets beat the Bruins in Boston 6-2. It was tied 2-2 in the third when Winnipeg closed it out with 4 straight goals. Mark Scheifele gets 2, numbers 30 and 31. Kyle Connor gets his 30th, and Parker Ford scored his first NHL goal. Connor Hellebuck gets his 32nd win of the season. In the loss for Boston, Brad Marchand gets his 19th. With Washington's loss, even though it was a overtime loss, Winnipeg now has the most points in the NHL at that point with 75. One of the best moments of the week occurred in Montreal, where the Wild shut out the Canadiens 4-0. Marc-Andre Fleury, the Quebec native, playing his final regular season game and likely his final game there in his home province in Montreal. 17 saves in the shutout. Afterwards, the entire Canadiens team got in a line to shake Marc-Andre Fleury's hand before leaving the ice for Fleury. Career shutout number 76 in his illustrious career.
And he has tied Martin Brodeur as the only goalies in NHL history to record a shutout in 21 different seasons. He's also the first goalie in NHL history to record a shutout as both a teenager and in his 40s. So, a guy that's been successful his entire career. I would actually, when I saw this, I thought, I wish they had named him to the Canadian roster for the Four Nations tournament, because let him represent his country one last time. This tournament doesn't ultimately mean anything. It's not the Olympics. Why not give him a great moment? And we've got the Olympics next year. Why not give him that moment to kind of say goodbye to representing his country in a NHL sponsored tournament?
Yeah, one of the most beloved players of his generation, and the fans in Montreal were loving him that entire game as well.
Yeah, he's the Teemu Selanne of goalies. You know, he may never played for your team, but you loved him. And how could you hate Marc-Andre Fleury, no matter what fan you were or what team you're a fan of? He's just a guy that's impossible to hate, in my opinion.
Islanders won their sixth in a row with a 3-0 shutout of the Flyers in Philadelphia. Ilya Sorokin, 23 saves in net. Kyle Palmieri and Simon Holmstrom both scoring their 13th goals of the season. And Mark Gatcombe nets his first career NHL goal. For the Flyers, this would be the last game for forwards Joel Farabee and Morgan Frost, who were both traded after the game to Calgary, as we detailed earlier in the show. Lightning shut out the Kings 3-0. Andrei Vasilevsky, 28 saves for his 37th career shutout. Brendan Hagel, a pair of goals for Tampa Bay, goals 21 and 22, as the Kings were shut out for a second straight game and dropped to 0-3-1 on their current 5-game road trip.
Unlike a lot of the previous games that the Kings got shut out or had very few goals, this one, you could tell the goals were coming because they were hitting posts. They were getting great chances. They were inches away from scoring multiple times. So they were doing the right things, but they were not getting any breaks. A tough road trip, though, there, as they now had one game left on the road trip, which we will talk about in just a couple minutes.
Yeah, also a bit unlucky. They had 3 goals wiped away, 2 because of offsides challenge and 1 because of a bad goalie interference call. So just everything was not going right for the Kings on this road trip.
I got to ask you this. You mentioned Drew Doughty coming back into the lineup. And those of you that have been watching Locked On LA Kings, you know that the Kings have employed an 11-7 formation for much of the year while Doughty was out of the lineup. 11 forwards, 7 defensemen. Instead of keeping that going, they went to a 12-6, and they've benched Brandt Clarke rather than benching Jacob Movereri, which is the guy I would have told to have a seat, because who cares about him? But Brandt Clarke is an offensive defenseman or has offensive skill, and you're struggling to score goals. What did you think of the decision to not go with the 11-7 and keep him on the ice to potentially get some offense going?
I'm a little surprised because they've had so much success with it. I'm not exactly sure why they've decided to go back to the 12-6. I didn't have an issue with Brandt Clarke being a healthy scratch. He has not played well late. He started the season really well, but he hasn't played well late. Rookie season, it's fine. But they want to, you know how it is. They want to keep the right-handed shots on the right side, the left-handed shots on the left side. So Moverar's a left shot. He's on the left side. So that's
I'm saying you go 11-7, you can still do that, but still get the kid in there to potentially help out offensively. It was surprising.
Hurricanes got by the Blackhawks 3-2. Mikko Rantanen gets his first goal as a member of the Hurricanes, his 26th of the season. Seth Jarvis scores his 20th, and defenseman Jacob Slavin gets the game winner. In the loss for Chicago, Connor Bedard scored his 15th of the season. Flames down the Ducks 4-1. Matt Cronado had 2 goals in the third period for Calgary. Numbers 12 and 13 for him. Blake Coleman gets his 12th. That was the game winner. And rookie goalie Dustin Wolf made 30 saves in net. In the loss for Anaheim, Frank Vetrano scored his 15th of the season. Calgary moved 1 point back of LA, third place in the Pacific Division at that point. Red Wings got by the Oilers in Edmonton 3-2 in a shootout. Detroit captain Dylan Larkin scored his 22nd goal of the season in regulation, also added a goal in the shootout as well. In the loss, Leon Draisaitl scores his NHL-leading 36th goal of the season. The Oilers still tied with Vegas for the top spot in the Pacific Division at that point, both with 68 points. That was because the Blue Jackets knocked off the Golden Knights in Vegas, 2-1 in overtime. Cole Sillinger gets the OT game winner for Columbus. Adam Fantilli added his 15th, and goalie Elvis Merzlikins made 25 saves in net. In the loss for Vegas, Tomas Hertl gets his 20th. Columbus has points in 10 of their last 12 games at that point, going 9-2-1 and moving back into the final wildcard spot in the East, 1 point up on Boston at that point.
Not only an amazing season from Columbus after the tragedy that they endured in the offseason, but doing it recently in the last few weeks without Sean Monahan, who's been one of their best players, and he's been injured and is going to be injured for quite some time. It's amazing what they are able to do, and huge marks to the players, the coaches, and the entire organization in Columbus for finding a way to be successful this season. And now they believe this is a team that believes they belong in the playoffs and they can beat anybody. Beating Vegas is, Vegas is the Stanley Cup champion 2 years ago. And that this is a team that is no longer just living on house money. They're playing with confidence that they can beat any team on any given night.
And the Kraken rolled over the Sharks 6-2. Defenseman Brandon Montour had a pair of goals for Seattle, numbers 9 and 10. Jaden Schwartz added his 18th. In the loss for San Jose, Tyler Toffoli gets his 18th of the season. Seattle also announcing that forward Yanni Gourde would be out 5 to 7 weeks following sports hernia surgery. Moving on to Friday, we had 4 games, and the Avalanche shut out the Blues 5-0 behind 19 saves from Mackenzie Blackwood for his first shutout with the Avalanche. In his home debut, Marty Necas gets his first goal with Colorado, his 17th on the year. And Jonathan Drouin had a pair of goals, numbers 5 and 6. Cale Makar also getting his 19th of the season, leading all defensemen. That was all part of a 4-goal opening period for Colorado. St. Louis at the time had lost 4 in a row and 5 of 6.
And Nathan MacKinnon getting his 60th assist of the season, giving him 3 straight 60-plus assist seasons, which ties him with Artemi Panarin, Quinn Hughes, and Matthew Tkachuk for second most among all active players. Each of those guys could record a 4th straight this season to pass him, but they're all chasing Connor McDavid, who has 8 consecutive 60-plus assist seasons and counting. He will probably add to that this year, almost assuredly. I think Artemi Panarin and Quinn Hughes have a very good chance of extending their streaks. Matthew Tkachuk does not. I think he would be hard-pressed to reach that number this season, but another milestone for Nathan MacKinnon, who is just a consistently elite player year in and year out.
Stars down the Canucks 5-3. Roope Hintz and Jason Robertson each scored twice. For Hintz, goals 21 and 22. For Robertson, goals 18 and 19. In the loss, Jake DeBrusk gets his 18th for Vancouver. And Thatcher Demko suffered his first career regulation loss against Dallas in 9 starts. JT Miller, a healthy scratch in this one, and he was later announced during the game that he was in fact traded to the New York Rangers.
If they're not celebrating Star or Roope Hintz goals with hip hip Roope, it's a lost opportunity.
Also, one injury note for Dallas, they announced that Niels Lundqvist underwent season-ending shoulder surgery. Blue Jackets edge the Utah Hockey Club on the road 3-2 in overtime. Defenseman Zach Werenski gets the OT game winner on a breakaway, his 17th of the year. That capped a rally for Columbus, who scored the final 3 goals of the game. Kirill Marchenko added his 21st. And just another example of why we love hockey players. Blue Jackets forward James Van Riemsdyk lost 4 teeth and got 30 stitches from a high stick from Ian Cole, returned to the game and had an assist. Amazing.
Yeah, it's for most people, that's the end of your day at work.
Yes.
And for a hockey player, it's when can I get back out there? And also kudos to the doctors getting him fixed up and ready to go and back out there as quick as they could.
Not only is it the end of my workday, you're not going to be seeing me for a while.
Right.
And the Sabres edge the Predators 4-3. Yuri Kulik scored twice for Buffalo, goals 10 and 11, including the game winner in the third period. Jason Zucker added his 17th, and Rasmus Dahlin gets 2 assists to move into second all-time in Sabres franchise history in points by a defenseman.
How about that? The Sabres are not a young franchise. That's impressive for Dahlin.
Let's move on to Saturday. 9 games on the schedule, and in a battle of the top 2 teams in the NHL, the Jets edge the Capitals in D.C. 5-4 on defenseman Josh Morrissey's overtime game winner. It was his second goal of the game, numbers 6 and 7 on the season for him. In the loss, Tom Wilson scored his 21st, and Alexander Ovechkin scores his 24th goal of the season. Career goal number 877. As I don't have there it is right here. Boom, 877. There it goes on the graphic if you're watching on YouTube. He's now 18 away from breaking Wayne Gretzky's all-time goal-scoring record with 30 games left to go in the regular season. Also in this one, Connor Hellebuck for the Winnipeg Jets gets his 33rd win of the season. He's on pace to break the record for wins in a single season by a goaltender, which is 48, held by both Martin Brodeur and Braden Holtby. And oh, by the way, this was my Grandma Fiddler game of the week.
Well, I don't know what the Jets situation is going to be in the stretch run for their seeding, if they wrap up the Central Division with a week to go or anything of that nature. But we saw in the NFL, Saquon Barkley had a chance to break a long-time record for the most rushing yards in a regular season. And because the last game of the season didn't matter to the Eagles in the standings, they benched him. And I didn't like that. I would like to have seen him chase the record. The fans would have loved it. He deserved it, I thought, and he deserved the opportunity, and history could have been made. My point is, I hope the Jets do not rest Connor Hellebuck down the stretch to get him rested for the playoffs. Let him chase history. He's having an amazing season. He's a young man who's in the prime of his life. He'll be fine. Him resting for a couple days is not going to be the difference between winning and losing game 6 in the second or third round. So let him chase history and let him try and become the first goalie in NHL history with 50 wins in the regular season. That would be such an amazing mark that he would be able to keep with him for the rest of his life.
Also, pretty good matchup between the Maple Leafs and Oilers. Toronto gets the 4-3 win. William Nylander scores his 30th. Matthew Nyes his 19th. And Mitch Marner's 16th of the year turned out to be the game winner. Edmonton did score 2 goals in the third to try and mount a comeback. Zach Hyman gets his 18th, but they could not get the equalizer. Joseph Woll, 45 saves in net in the win for Toronto.
Busy man that night. What a pair of games for Hockey Night in Canada, for sure.
Bruins beat the Rangers 6-2. That was our Puck Podcast watch party game this past week. David Pastrnak had a hat trick for Boston, goals 25, 26, and 27 to spoil the New York debut of JT Miller, who did have 2 of the Rangers' 3 goals, numbers 10 and 11 on the season for him. A reminder that this coming Saturday, we'll have another Puck Podcast watch party as the Detroit Red Wings host the Tampa Bay Lightning. That is a 1 p.m. Eastern time start if you would like to join us over on the YouTube channel. Senators embarrassed the Wild 6-0. They outshot Minnesota 52-16. Ottawa had 21 shots in the first, 26 in the second, and just 15 in the third. The Wild, meanwhile, had 8 shots on goal in the first period and combined for 8 in the second and third periods. Josh Norris scored his 19th of the season. Tim Stützle his 17th, and Levi Marlenen gets the shutout in net. Meanwhile, the loss for Wild netminder Philip Gustafsson comes despite 46 saves in net. There was a ugly incident in this game. Minnesota's Ryan Hartman received a match penalty for an intent to injure when he put his full weight onto Tim Stützle during a face-off. When Stützle was kind of underneath him, he drove his head into the ice. Stützle ended up getting cut. He did return, talked about him scoring a goal, but Ryan Hartman will be having he's invited to have an in-person hearing with the Department of Player Safety, so he will be getting a suspension. We'll be interested to see how long he's suspended for.
When I watched it, and I've seen it a couple times now, look, it's a dirty act, there's no doubt, but I can't imagine it was predetermined. It was just kind of you think it was the frustration of getting their ass kicked and being embarrassed, and he took an opportunity that he didn't think anybody would notice, because I can't imagine. Ryan Hartman's not a dirty player, and it didn't seem that, you can't have planned that, on the face-off, I'm going to let this guy fall in front of me and then I'm going to drive him in, it's just, so it wasn't predetermined, but
Right.
Man almighty, it was absurd to watch knowing, it's Stützle's lucky he didn't get more seriously injured when you've got an NHL player putting their full weight, driving you head first into the ice. Brutal.
Yeah, there's no way he meant to do that, because there's no way you would know that Stützle would be in that position to be able to do that. But I just think in the moment, I don't know why. I don't even recall what the score was at the time that he decided to do that, but it just seemed like he felt like, oh, I've got an opportunity here to do something. And who knows if something happened during the game where he was retaliating for something, but certainly a dangerous play. And I think you're right. I think Stützle was pretty lucky to not get a concussion or something like that in that situation.
Well, Josh Norris in that game did become the second Senators player to score a shorthanded goal in back-to-back games. The other to do it was Daniel Alfredson back in 2007 in games we covered here on the Puck Podcast. So a back-to-back. If you're on the power play against Ottawa, watch out for Josh Norris.
Islanders made it 7 wins in a row with a 3-2 overtime win over the Lightning in Tampa. Defenseman Tony DeAngelo gets the overtime game winner on a breakaway for his first goal of the season after being signed last week. Kyle Palmieri added his 14th of the season. Adam Boquist just picked off waivers from Florida, scored his first goal as an Islander, as those moves are certainly working out, at least on the short term. In the loss, Nikita Kucherov scored with 46 seconds left to help the Bolts get a point out of it, his 24th of the season, and Jake Gensel had his 26th of the year.
As you mentioned, Lou Lamoriello, the Islanders GM, with the Midas touch, getting DeAngelo out of Russia, out of Europe, I guess. I'm not sure that he was in the KHL, but out of Europe, and getting Boquist off waivers and immediately paying dividends. Had to feel good for both those guys. Had to feel good for Lou Lamoriello, and the Islanders absolutely rolling right now. They do not want the Four Nations tournament to start right now. They want to keep playing and racking up wins as much as possible.
Panthers handle the Blackhawks 5-1. Sam Reinhart gets his 30th goal of the season. Matthew Tkachuk his 17th, and goalie Sergei Bobrovsky 24 saves in net, all to help head coach Paul Maurice record his 900th career victory. Just the fourth head coach in NHL history to achieve that mark, joining Barry Trotz, Joel Quenneville, and Scotty Bowman. In the loss, the lone goal for Chicago was historic as Sam Reinhart scored the Panthers. Let me see. Oh, okay. The historic goal for the Blackhawks. Fastest goal in franchise history, Landon Slaggert scoring 7 seconds into the game. Sam Reinhart for the Panthers did score, as I mentioned, a goal, his 30th, 4 straight seasons, 30 goals or more. The only other Panthers player ever to do that was former LA Kings great Olli Jokinen. Speaking of the Kings,
I would not have guessed that. I would have guessed Pavel Bure.
Speaking of the Kings, they get a much-needed win over the Hurricanes 4-2 to close out that road trip with a victory. They had been in that scoring slump. They had been shut out back-to-back losses. Kevin Fiala, though, a pair of goals, numbers 17 and 18 for him, as, again, the Kings managed to get a road win in that final game of their road trip.
That game, as you know, Eddie, was the 50th game of the season, making the Kings the last one to reach the 50-game mark due to the postponed game against Calgary due to the wildfires. But of those 50 games, that was their 31st road game of the year, meaning that of the 32 remaining games, 22 of them will be played at home, where they have a league best 815 point percentage. If that holds, they are on pace to add 35 points to their total in just their home games, plus whatever they can obtain in their remaining 10 road games. So the Kings have gotten through the teeth of their schedule. Now they get a lot of games at home. In fact, that was the last road game they played this month until the absolute end of the month, end of February. They will be home the rest of the month, obviously with the Four Nations Cup or tournament breaking that up a little bit, but a lot of home games remaining for your LA Kings.
Red Wings down the Flames in Calgary 3-1 for their 5th win in a row. Detroit captain Dylan Larkin gets his 23rd goal of the season, while goalie Cam Talbot made 33 saves in net. In the loss for Calgary, Nazem Kadri gets his 18th of the year. Penguins shut out the Predators 3-0 behind 25 saves from Alex Nedeljkovic. Sidney Crosby gets a goal for a 4th straight game. He's got 17 on the season, and Brian Rust added his 20th. Pittsburgh defenseman Erik Karlsson had 2 assists to give him 30 on the season. That's the 12th time in his career he's recorded 30 or more assists in a single season. Danton Heinen and Vincent Desharnais made their Pittsburgh debuts in this game after being traded from Vancouver. Neither registered a point. And finally, Sunday, 9 games on the schedule as the Rangers knock off the Golden Knights 4-2, and Jonathan Quick finally gets his 400th career win. He'd been stuck there for a while. First U.S.-born goalie to ever reach 400 career victories. Artemi Panarin had his 22nd goal. J.T. Miller, 2 assists. And Mika Zibanejad had a goal in his 900th career game. In the loss, Jack Eichel scored his 18th of the season for the Golden Knights, who picked up veteran forward Brandon Saad off of waivers from the Blues. They signed him to a 1-year deal worth $1.5 million, and he made his debut for the Golden Knights, did not have a point.
Not off waivers. He was free to sign with anybody. They had bought out. They had mutually agreed to terminate his contract with St. Louis, so he was free to sign with anybody. Vegas was the clubhouse leader and the team that showed the interest, and he'd like to chase the Stanley Cup. So he signed with them on a very team-friendly deal for the remainder of the year. But a big win for the Rangers as they continue to try and push to get back into a playoff spot. And JT Miller already, man, 2 goals, 2 assists in 2 games, already showing great chemistry and great production with his new team. That's, again, what an absolute theft of a deal for the Rangers.
Yeah, I'm sure the Canucks fans feel great that he's actually trying now, apparently.
I mean, look, I've been on the other end of that. Jeff Friesen did that with the Ducks. He came here and he sucked his thumb for the entire time he was in Anaheim, and then he went to New Jersey and celebrated helping beat the Ducks in the Stanley Cup final. So F that guy. And I get it. When you're a professional, it's one thing if you have a personal beef with somebody in the locker room for whatever reason. It's another thing if you just don't want to be in a city because you're just, why did San Jose trade me? Why, if you're going to pout about it, go see a therapist, man. Get yourself some help. Just be a professional. But anyway, so I get the spurned feelings, but we knew this was coming for weeks in Vancouver. It just was not going to work out there. And there was no way, unfortunately, irreconcilable differences. And unfortunately, they lost a great player who's immediately playing great hockey and probably will for the duration of his contract in New York.
Stars won their 5th straight game, beating the Blue Jackets 5-3. Evgeny Dadonov scored 2 goals in the 3rd period, numbers 14 and 15. Wyatt Johnston also gets his 15th goal of the season. In the loss for Columbus, Adam Fantilli gets his 16th goal. And leading goal scorer Kirill Marchenko left in the 2nd period, did not return. Don't have an update on his condition. Cody Ceci was in the Dallas lineup, played 22 minutes and 16 seconds. And Mikael Granlund also making his Stars debut. He had an assist in his first game.
I don't know if you saw the highlights, Eddie, but the Stars wore their blackout jerseys with the neon green, all black neon green. I really like those jerseys. And I'm told from listener and friend of the show, James Curry, that this is the last year they will be using those as a 3rd jersey. And that's unfortunate because those are sharp looking jerseys, in my opinion.
Well, you'll have to get yourself one before they stop wearing.
I don't think about no, that's not going to happen. But right. I liked watching them.
Panthers snapped the Islanders' 7-game winning streak with a hat trick from Carter Verhaeghe, goals 13, 14, and 15 for Verhaeghe. Sam Reinhart gets his 31st this season as well in the victory for Florida. Red Wings down the Canucks 3-2 in overtime for their 6th win in a row. So maybe the coaching bump is back for Todd McClellan and the Red Wings. Alex DeBrincat scored twice, 22 and 23 on the season for him, including the overtime game winner. In the loss for Vancouver, Philip Hedl did score in his debut with the team, his 12th goal of the year. And Marcus Pettersson, no points, played 25 minutes and 57 seconds. Also some news involving the Red Wings. They announced the defenseman Jeff Petrie, who's been out since January the 2nd, will undergo surgery and be out 6 to 8 weeks.
Which is pretty much the rest of the regular season for him. So if they make the playoffs, hopefully he will be available to them in the postseason.
Sabres down the Devils 4-3. Tage Thompson gets his 26th goal of the season, but also left after taking an elbow from New Jersey's Stefan Nason in the head. Thompson's helmet came off. He was on the ice for a while. Nason was given a game misconduct. Jason Zucker added his 18th goal. JT Peterka his 15th. New Jersey scored twice in the 3rd period, but their comeback fell short. Also, Rasmus Dahlin had 2 more assists for Buffalo and now moved into 2nd place all-time in franchise history in assists by a defenseman. Jack Hughes, his 21st goal in the loss.
I would imagine we will be talking next week about Stefan Nason getting a hearing from the Department of Player Safety for his actions and either a fine or probably a suspension because that was pretty egregious.
Avalanche shut out the Flyers 2-0 behind 24 saves from goalie Mackenzie Blackwood. His 2nd straight shutout. Nathan McKinnon gets his 20th goal of the season and his NHL-leading 80th point of the year. For Philadelphia, we talked about the offensive woes for the Kings. Flyers have now been shut out in 3 straight games.
Woof. Not good, man. And they're making trades. They're going to be big-time sellers, I would think, here at the deadline. It's not this year. It's not going to happen. There's too many teams to catch and pass at this point. Start working on next year.
Ducks down the Canadians 3-2. Anaheim fell behind 2-0 in the first period, then scored 3 straight goals. Frank Vetrano gets his 16th. That tied it. Alex Killorn's 3rd period goal was the game winner as Montreal is riding a 5-game losing streak. Flames defeat the Kraken 3-2. Calgary jumping out to a 3-0 lead. Morgan Frost scoring his first goal as a Flame. Jonathan Huberdeau added his 20th of the season. That turned out to be the game winner on the power play. In the loss for Seattle, Capo Caco gets his 9th goal of the season. And the Blues got by the Utah Hockey Club on the road 2-1. Jordan Kyrou scored the game winner in the third period, his 22nd goal of the season, while Jordan Bennington made 24 saves in net. By the way, news for the Utah Hockey Club. Apparently, they are moving on from Yeti, announcing the 3 finalists: Utah Hockey Club, Utah Mammoth, and Utah Outlaws.
Yeah, they had a different one there, and then they immediately got rid of that one because nobody liked it. I forget. I don't even remember what it was.
Like the Wasatch or something?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was, because of the Wasatch Mountains. And I'm like, nobody's going to vote for the Wasatch. So Hockey Club, and as I told you, it's not even a real, when it was Wasatch, it wasn't even a real, we're going to leave it up to the fans. It's going to be Mammoth when your other options are Hockey Club and Wasatch. I mean,
or
hey,
Outlaws.
kids. Well, Outlaws is at least better than, that's a viable option. But Wasatch and Hockey Club was not. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So it's a shame they've moved on from Yeti. They've abandoned that. It seemed like a great fit. There was a lot of people behind it, a lot of sentiment behind it from around the world. But if they go with Mammoth, there's some really cool imagery that they could go with that could make it very fun. So I hope that's the one that wins. And I hope they embrace the woolly mammoth, the tusks, the whole thing, and really embrace that imagery, because I think it could be very cool.
All right, that was the week that was in the NHL. We do have some other notes to mention, but we do want to get to the standings. And because the Calgary game ended right before we went on, and the I don't know if the stats were, or the standings, I should say, were updated fast enough. We are going to give you the standings, but I'm just going to read them off my phone here. So we'll start with the Central Division, and the top team, of course, is the Winnipeg Jets. 77 points on the season, 37, 14, and 3 is the record. Dallas in second place in the Central with 69 points. So they're 8 points back of Winnipeg. Minnesota's in third place with 66. Then you got Colorado with 64 points. St. Louis with 52. Utah 51. Nashville 43 points, and Chicago in last place with 37 points. Over in the Pacific Division, you've got the Edmonton Oilers with 68 points. The Vegas Golden Knights also with 68 points, although Edmonton has played one fewer game and has one more regulation win, or one more win, I should say, than Vegas. So they would get the number one spot as it stands right now. Kings are in third place with 60 points. Calgary just 1 point back with 59. Vancouver 57. They're hanging around. Ducks have 50 points. The Kraken have 49, and the Sharks with 36 points. So the wild card race right now in the West, your 2 wild card teams are Colorado and Calgary. Vancouver, the first team on the outside looking in, again, 2 points back of the Flames. St. Louis would be up next with 52 points.
It is amazing, as I looked at the standings earlier today, that the Kings seem like a very solid playoff team all season, and yet are 3 points out of being, well, now 2 points out of being completely out of the playoffs. And that is surprising that they would drop, that they're even that close. Now, again, they have a lot of home games coming up, and they've been an excellent home team, but I didn't think they were, their playoff positioning was that perilous. But Calgary and Vancouver, and we'll see what Vancouver can do now that their roster is somewhat settled and the locker room is settled. I don't think they'll come and pass them, but it's the fact that it's only a 3-point gap is very surprising.
Let's check out the Atlantic Division, where the Florida Panthers now sit atop the standings with 67 points. They have 3 more points than the Toronto Maple Leafs, who have 64, although the Panthers have played 2 more games than the Maple Leafs. You've got Ottawa in third place with 60 points, then Detroit with 59, Tampa Bay with 58, Boston 58 as well, Montreal 53 points, and Buffalo with 47 points.
What a race that is going to be in that Atlantic Division, man. Florida seems like a solid bet. Toronto seems like a solid bet. But Ottawa, Detroit, Tampa, and Boston are all separated by 2 points. That is going to be fantastic games down the stretch.
Metropolitan Division, Washington on top with 75 points, most points in the East. Overall record of 34, 11, and 7. They have a 7-point lead on second place Carolina, who has 68 points. New Jersey, 64 points in third place. Then you've got Columbus with 59 points, the Islanders with 55, the Rangers with 54, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia both with 52 points.
And it shows you right there. You talked about the Islanders have won 7 straight, and that gets them to 55 points. They're still a long way from catching and passing the teams that they need to get into a playoff spot. And they're ahead of the New York Rangers, who, yes, they added JT Miller, but they have work to do in these last 30 games if they want to make the playoffs. A lot of teams to catch and pass, and those teams are playing some good hockey right now, like Detroit, like Ottawa, like Tampa, like Columbus, like the Islanders.
The Red Wings and the Blue Jackets right now are your 2 wildcard teams. They both have 59 points. Tampa Bay is the first team on the outside looking in with 58 points. They have played 2 fewer games than both the Red Wings and the Blue Jackets. The Bruins also 58 points. They played 3 more games, though, than Tampa Bay. Then you've got the Islanders with 55 points, the Rangers 54, Canadians 53, Penguins 52, and the Flyers 52, and then Buffalo 47 points.
Well, it leads into the games to watch this coming week. And you mentioned the game that we're going to be watching as our watch party on Saturday, Lightning Red Wings. Those are 2 teams that are fighting for playoff positioning. That could be a great game to determine who holds a wild card spot going into the First Nations or the 4 Nations tournament. So should be a great game that if you want to join us here on YouTube on Saturday.
And before we go, a couple other notes of importance to pass along. The NHL and the NHLPA agreed to significant increases to the league's salary cap over the next 3 seasons, marking a major shift following several years of slower cap growth. Certainly COVID was a factor in all that. But the salary cap for the 2024-25 season is $88 million. Then the projected cap going forward is $95.5 million in 2025-26. $104 million in 2026-27, and $13.5 million in 2027-28.
This is great news for the big market teams. Toronto, Edmonton, not Edmonton being a big market, but a team that will spend to the cap. The Rangers, the Bruins, the Blackhawks, all these teams that have deep pockets and are willing to spend to the cap. This is great news for them because they will not only be able to retain talent, but they will be able to add talent. And this is not great news for smaller market teams that may be a little bit more internal budget. We'll see who they are, but that's up to individual teams. These are all billionaire owners. They can all afford to pay this. There's a reason these are going up, and it's because revenue is going up. The player escrow has been paid off. There's no more escrow payments from the players. So this is great growth. It's a sign of a very healthy league. And it's amazing that in a few years, we will have a salary cap of $113.5 million. And we're in the 80s right now. That's amazing growth. So good sign for the NHL's financial health.
And one other quick note, we talked about Alex Pietrangelo dropping out of the 4 Nations face-off. The league announced that they will not be suspending any players that drop out of the event like they were doing when players were skipping out on the All-Star game. And there was some question as to whether they were going to do that or not. But the league confirming they will not be suspending Alex Pietrangelo or any other player who decides to not participate in the 4 Nations face-off.
Good. I mean, this is because this is not an exhibition. This is not for just for fun for the fans. This is competition, and you could potentially be getting hurt. And if you're nursing an injury, you deserve those 2 weeks off.
Hey, that'll do it for our first period.
To look for this week. I got a full list. You write this down so you don't forget every week, Eddie. I got these every week.
We do this in the third period. We don't do it in the first period.
I'm doing it now because people here on YouTube are watching.
Go ahead.
Monday, watch the Senators Predators. That's a good game. Senators are good. Well, you look at Monday's schedule and you tell me a better game. Right. There isn't one. Panthers Capitals on Tuesday is a dandy. Obviously, this defending Stanley Cup champ.
There's only. You could have mentioned there's only one game on Monday.
That's why it's the game to watch, my friend.
That makes sense.
Panthers Capitals on Tuesday is definitely the game to watch. The defending Stanley Cup champs against the best team in the East, and Alexander Ovechkin chasing Gretzky. Bruins Rangers rematch of the game we did on this past Saturday. On Wednesday is the best game, in my opinion, on Wednesday. Thursday, Golden Knights Devils. Very good game between 2 Stanley Cup contenders. Friday, Avalanche Oilers, elite talent on the ice from both teams. Saturday, of course, our watch along Lightning Red Wings. And then Sunday, there's not a lot of good games on Sunday, but I'm going with Hockey Club versus Capitals simply because watching Alexander Ovechkin chase Gretzky's record.
Yeah, I think there's another game on that Sunday as well that other people might be watching. Hey, that's going to do it for our first period of our YouTube show. If you are enjoying this and want to hear more, check out the remaining 2 periods of our podcast. Just go to search Puck Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're listening to the podcast, the second and third periods are coming up in just a second. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm Eddie Garcia. He's Doug Stolhand, and we will talk to you next Monday with another edition of the Puck Podcast.